Abraham has barely had enough time to recover from that awkward covenant surgery before his next big adventure kicks off. This chapter is a wild mix of prophecy, hospitality, and impressive negotiations. Welcome to the Gravel Gospel. I'm Bionic Leg. So it's probably the hottest part of the day down the Oaks of Mamre. So where Abraham set up camp. So last thing that's happened, God has changed his name. They've got the covenant, the circumcision. Now things are just kind of calming down-ish. And it's interesting because he's hanging out at the tent, and then he sees three men coming up towards him. Now, at this point, Scripture doesn't specifically say who they are, but just a little bit later, just a couple lines later, it calls out one of them, says Lord, and it uses a capital L. So it's safe to infer from this, Abraham immediately knows one of them is God. And he's got two angels with him in tow. So obviously, Abraham doesn't just wave all, hey, Forrest Gump-like. I mean, he locks in, hospitality mode. He runs out, bows to the ground, and implores him. He's like, hey, please stay. And he tells him, he's like, hey, just stay for a bit. I'll get some water. We'll get you some food, get you, freshened up, and you can go do what you got to do. Because Abraham doesn't know what's going on. He just knows God, two angels shows up. That's all he knows. Now, what I appreciate about how God works then and now is he could have said, sorry, dude, we got a thing. And then they just bounce. But because of his nature, because of God's nature, and because of the relationship with him and Abraham, he wants to spend time with Abraham. Even though they're on a mission, they've got a task they have to do. He's like, you know what? I can take an hour, I can take 5 minutes, whatever that is, and spend time. So I really appreciate that. Now, I don't know why I find this next part funny, comical. I don't know, but it's interesting because Scripture says, and they said, so do as you have said. Now, what cracks me up is the usage of the word they, as in like all three of them at the same time saying, so do as you said. And I can totally, in my mind's eye, I can totally picture God with this little tiny grin on his face while the three of them are saying this at the exact same time. I don't know. It's funny to me. But either way, so Abraham, I gotta get used to saying that. He doesn't just go grab leftovers. I mean, obviously he knows who he's entertaining. So he tells Sarah, he's like, hey, get the good flour, make some bread. He goes out to the cattle, picks the best calf, goes to the servant, hey, puts him to work, get this thing taken care of. So they're having, veal, they're having curds, milk. He's giving them his best. I mean, you can go all the way back to the issue with Cain and Abel, and the issue of giving one's best when it comes to serving God. So I mean, here's another example of this, but I don't want to get too far ahead. So they have food, they're hanging out, they're eating. And so while they're eating, one of the men, it doesn't say who, it just says one of the men says, ask the question. It's like, hey, where's Sarah? And Abraham says, she's in the tent. And one of the guests, and it's established that at this point it is God. And I can totally see it. He's sitting there eating. He's not even looking up. Because he's eating his food, He drops the bombshell. He says, while he's looking down, by this time next year, your wife, Sarah, she's going to have a son. And that's just crazy. Now, obviously, he's already said this. He's already established that God is going to give Abraham Isaac. But it's kind of neat that they're sitting there while they're eating. He says that. And even though, it's probably just a handful of them eating food, the rest of the camp, they're off doing whatever they're doing. So it's just a handful of them. But I guarantee you could hear what he just said all the way down in Egypt. Now, Sarah she's right behind the tent flap. Okay, she's listening. And remember, she's 90. Abraham is 100. And so when she hears this, she has this reactionary internal laugh out loud moment. She's thinking, an old lady like me getting pregnant with this old guy? Nah. And God being God, he called her out immediately, and it's hilarious. When he does it, he's probably smiling when he says this. He's still eating his food, still eating. Doesn't look up. Why did Sarah laugh? Is anything too hard for God? Now, God knows the answer. He knows how we're wired. But it is important to know that God's like, hey, I'm going to take care of it. And Sarah's understandably terrified. She tries to dodge it. It's a very pointed question. And she's like, I didn't laugh. Really? This is who you're telling this to? You're telling God, who just heard you laugh, who knows our hearts and minds? You're trying to tell him you didn't laugh. Okay. And God just looks at her. Like, yeah, he did. I find it really funny. It's just a quick little back and forth between Sarah and God, and it's really funny. It's just those two lines. Why did you laugh? I didn't laugh. Yes, you did. And then we move on to the next thing. But either way, I still find it really funny. So, and it goes back to God knowing our hearts. So they finish eating. They get up to get ready to head towards Sodom because that's where they're going. And Abraham, he's polite. He walks with them. When you got somebody over to the house, you walk with. They're leaving, so you walk with them to the door. So obviously Abraham is walking with his guests as they're leaving, and God has this interesting internal monologue. He thinks, should I keep Abraham in the dark? He's thinking to himself. He says, his offspring's going to be a huge nation. I've picked him to teach his kids to live my ways, to live kindly and fairly. And he decides, you know what, I'm just going to break it to Abraham. Because, again, Abraham does not know why they're there. He just knows they're going somewhere. That's all he knows. But God tells him, he says, the cries from the victims in Sodom and Gomorrah, they're deafening. Their sin is massive. And I'm going to go down and see if it's really bad as it sounds. So the other two men, they keep moving, but Abraham kind of cuts God off, which is funny because it's like, you're really going to cut God off. Okay. He stands in God's path. And this is kind of one of those times that you see somebody directly interceding in the Old Testament. If not, maybe the first time you see somebody directly interceding for another people. Because he knows what God is implying. He knows the people of Sodom. He knows the people of Gomorrah. Lot lives in Sodom. So it's safe to say that he's done trade and so on and so forth. So he knows what's going down. And he knows it's not going to look good for the people. But, Abraham says, he says, are you going to wipe out the good people along with the bad? That doesn't sound like you. Doesn't the judge of all the earth judge with justice? And this is where you see kind of a tit for tat going back and forth. And it's not really it's negotiations is really what it boils down to. And it starts, Abraham. He's like, well, what if there's 50 decent people? Would you spare the city for them? And God's like, yes, if I find 50, I will spare the whole place. And then the next time he says, because he realizes he might have set the bar too high, which is very unfortunate. Because that's bonkers. So you've got two major cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, and 50 righteous people is too high? That's insane. So he's like, okay, I'm just a guy made from dirt. What if you're 5 short? 45? And so they go all the way down to 10. There's the back and forth. Abraham says, what if you only find 10? And God says, for the sake of only 10, I will not destroy the city. So that's wild to think if he could only find 10. So God finishes talking. He heads off to the city. Abraham goes home, probably wondering if he even did the right thing. But either way, Abraham just negotiated God from 50 righteous people all the way down to 10 to save his nephew, to save Lot, because that's really what it boiled down to. But the real question is, are there even 10 good people in Sodom? Things are going to get really dark really fast. Or bright, depending on your perspective. But either way. So yeah, kind of a short one. There's really not a whole lot happens here. Obviously, we've got God, the two angels showing up, Abraham making him food. You got Sarah now, and then you got the intercession. So not a whole lot happened here. It's pretty short and to the point. Next time, things are going to get really dark and really bright really quick. So, but that's all we have for today. So, I'm Bionic Leg, and this is the Gravel Gospel. I appreciate you.